but we really need to see more of this, more regional initiatives, cross-sector, cross-region, cross-country. I think with the experiences we've been through in terms of the cyber attacks, we've learned a few lessons. That those cyber criminals have no borders for what they do. They do their crimes beyond borders, and they don't respect any lines or industry, so they're not limited to any specific route or location. So if we want to defend ourselves against such threat actors, we really need to bring our efforts together from multiple countries and also from multiple sectors. Whether we talk telecom, whether we talk technology, whether we even talk governance, right? So this is really important what we're seeing today. And today, panel discussion, we're going to talk about OT, and we're probably going to touch on national critical infrastructure a little bit. Before we start the discussion, we're going to have each of our guests or panelists to basically present 5 minutes around what they're focusing on as a company and in the OT cybersecurity domain. We'll start with the sequence. We'll start with our colleague Vikas. So if you can join, they will run the presentation for you, and we will go in the sequence, right? Yeah, you can stand here.
Good afternoon. I hope I am audible enough. Could you please? So in the meanwhile, let me introduce myself. My name is Vikas Dahiya. I am Global Cybersecurity Sales Lead for Nokia. I am based out of Dubai. Very recently, I joined Nokia in this role, and I get to have a view of global cybersecurity threat landscape and how criminals are intruding into various networks. And as Othman pointed out, they have no scruples, no boundaries, and they just attack without any concerns. So before I get into the presentation, I wanted to just set the context. We have limited time, so I don't want to eat into my panelists' time. I will keep it very, very precise. The idea of today's presentation is to give you a guidance on as to what threat landscape is prevalent at the moment, what we see as major security trends that are hitting various sectors. I'm going to just touch upon a little bit on regulation in a minute or so, how they are evolving and how they are creating more let's say pressures on various sectors to embrace those regulations, have robust security measures, and then briefly for a minute what typically global cybersecurity practices should be adopted to make your defenses strong, and then maybe a minute or so on how Nokia is playing a vital role in providing solutions and services in this area. So going to the next, could you just go to the next slide?
Yes,
oh, this is here. So I'll quickly come to, let me just come here, I think it becomes easy. So this is a Verizon data breach investigation report which talks about some of the trends that we see which is plaguing the market. So if you look at it, these are very common sort of themes that you will see from other panelists as well. Ransomware is increasing. So ransomware, if I were to describe in very simplistic terms, is not something that breaches your defense. This is what criminals do after they breach. So they will do the hello? Yeah. So this is what they do after they breach your system. So once they are into your network, what kind of havoc they can lead is something that ransomware does. It's from the rise, and this is something which we need to watch out for. Human element is still one of the gray areas that has to be plugged, because if humans they click on a phishing link, they have weak passwords, they are using the same passwords, they are not educated enough, you will still see a lot of breaches happening despite you having the best defense in place, the technology, the procedures, the policies, etc. Application level attacks are also, supply chain is becoming very critical, because as we get into a world which is interconnected, you have third-party vendors, service providers, supply chain needs to be secured as well, not only the hardware, software, but the open source components which make up for supply chain as well. Regulatory, as I just spoke about, different countries have come out with their own regulations. Some of the key ones are the executive order of US, which is 14028, which is to secure the national infrastructure, critical infrastructure. So there are policies and guidelines which have been issued. There is a Telecom Security Act which just came out, which has to be implemented by Q1 of 2024. This is specific to UK telecom infrastructure. There is another one which the SOCI Act, which is the Critical Infrastructure Act in Australia. You also have Japan coming out with it. India just came out very recently. The one which I wanted to highlight is the NIS2, which is an updated version of NIS, which is Network Information Services Regulation Act. All these acts are defining some of the guidelines, and it is also spurring some of the cybersecurity best practices which critical infrastructure needs to embrace. And this is also just to give you a highlight that you have now nation states actively getting into this area, and not only the cyber criminals are actively regrouping between themselves, but it's the nation state which is waging a war on different countries, and there are a lot of examples in place. I don't want to get into that. So how can you just strengthen your security strategy and practices? Some few themes which I wanted to leave you with. So if you look at this slide, this talks about 5-6 areas. One is how you can do the security orchestration, and how you can detect and monitor your assets on a regular basis, and how that telemetry can be provided back to your security operations center using AI machine learning. You can detect well in advance, you can triage, you can analyze, and then you can have response playbooks which will automatically will remediate some of the vulnerabilities that you see. You're able to then take immediate actions so that the criminals are not spending more time in your network. So it is not only about preventative measure, it is also about once a threat has been detected, how quickly you are able to then take a follow-up action. Because more time a hackster or a criminal is going to spend in your network, the more damage they will be able to do in your system. So you need to have the right detection, monitoring capabilities, logging capability, vulnerability management. I need not emphasize. You need to manage it quite well as a program. Identity and access management, which is role-based access controls, privilege access management. So these are some of the layered security strategies that critical infrastructure needs to adopt. These are very basic, very foundational stuff, but a lot of times we are not able to implement those as a practice. So each layer has its own importance. Security assessments, the architecture, when you are starting any journey, whether it is a 5G or you are getting into any new product, any industrial 4.0 automation which is happening, any architecture or process that you do at the design phase itself, you need to embed cybersecurity. So with that, one last thought on this is that there are two terms which are being used very effectively in critical infrastructure. One is defense in depth, and the second one is the adaptive security strategy. What it means is that you need to continuously adapt your security controls, your policies, procedures based on how fast the threat is also evolving as well, because criminals are becoming so sophisticated with, you would have heard Chat GPT, which became a rage. And I was listening to one of the podcasts, and they say that English is the new coding language. So you and me, and most of you could be coders as well, you know how to write sophisticated codes, and then possibly, so a technology can be used as for good cause and for evil cause as well. So now it is so simple that if you don't have the right mechanism in place, you can also use AI machine learning to suit your cause, or just get your defenses in place. So with all that, I want to then come to this last as to how Nokia is playing a role in providing the best a holistic security strategy. So we have security consulting practice, we do assessments, we do transformation, and we provide a status of where you are in your cybersecurity posture and where you need to be. We have a set of product portfolios including security orchestration, and automation response platform, and a host of other platforms which play a critical role in the 5G infrastructure, and then the managed security services as well that we provide as an add-on service. With that, this is just a quick slide on how we have been a leading player in security for the last 15 years. Bell Labs, you would have heard, is an integral part of Nokia. We have deployed more than 15 5G security projects globally, and this list is not only restricted to Middle East with STC, Zain, etc., but the likes of T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T. We have been a leading security vendor to their 5G infrastructure and 4G LTE as well. So with that, I would like to hand it over to the next panelist. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll go next with, can you put us the slides for the next panelist, please? Yes, Mr. Tarek.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good afternoon, everyone. While the slides will start, let me introduce myself. My name is Tarek Akrama. I'm leading the OT cybersecurity business for Honeywell Building Technologies across Middle East, Turkey, and Africa region. Guys, the slides are working.
Please 1 minute.
Omar Al
Technical issue.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully it's not an OT problem.
Okay, let me just give a quick brief about Honeywell, because a lot of people will confuse what Honeywell does, because we have different divisions. So I belong to the building technologies, where we do all the building automations for large infrastructure such as airports, banks, universities, and Honeywell has multiple other divisions such as in aviation, process solutions, safety, and productivity. So what we will talk today is more relevant to the smart communities, smart buildings. So like Vikas said, the attacks, the risks are in large increase in all domains, including the critical infrastructure, and the damage is much more larger in OT than the IT for multiple reasons, which we will see in some more coming slides. So this is how we describe the smart community. Now smart communities are also an increase in the market. We see a lot of projects for smart buildings, smart communities. Also even our existing buildings now transforming into digitalization, where enhancing the user experience is the goal of vendors to add more technologies. So those technologies such as AI, big data, 5G, etc., are also bringing risk into that environment. That risk could be in malwares, could be in unmanaged infrastructure, social engineering, etc. So those terminologies are very common in cybersecurity domain, but how this can be described into OT, specific OT risk and vulnerabilities. So before we little deep dive in that, let's just differentiate what's IT versus OT. So all of us are very familiar with the IT. We all have laptops, we work with emails, servers, CRMs here in hotels, they have guest data, for example. We have all bank accounts, so this data classified as IT. So in IT, confidentiality of this data is the most dangerous and important aspect than integrity and availability. But when we talk about OT, here we are controlling things, we are doing things, we are producing things, such as in oil and gas, for example. A refinery is running upstreaming, downstreaming process. In manufacturing, we are producing, the plant is producing steel, producing petrochemicals, etc. In buildings, the process is continuous to give us for example, the AC, the lightings, the access control, the security, the CCTV. So all those systems are up and running, controlling and doing things. So once the damage happens in OT, it's not losing data, it's affecting that process. It could be large loss of money, such as in oil and gas industry, for example, or in airport losing CCTV for a certain period of time, which is not acceptable, affecting for example, the radar and navigation in an airport where you lose communication with planes. So imagine that damage can happen in such environment. So what would be the consequences? So this is in very quick the differentiation between IT and OT, just for us to imagine what could be the damage in OT and critical infrastructure environment. So why in OT are targeted systems, and what make them easier target? The simplest example is the life cycle of IT and OT. In IT, we replace laptop, server, infrastructure 3 to 5 years. So most probably that infrastructure is up to date, equipped with the right cybersecurity controls recommended by Microsoft, Dell, etc. as IT vendors. While in OT, we see a lot of system running for 10 plus years, where those cybersecurity controls are not yet equipped or designed at the time of producing this equipment or this item. So those systems have larger life cycle, which make them weak, which make them contain, for example, legacy unsupported. Unfortunately, the font is not clear enough, so hopefully you can read it. So it has default account passwords, it have unsupported equipments by the IT, because most probably the IT are theoretically responsible to support those, but in fact the expertise and the bandwidth will not make the IT really responsible of those OT systems. Plus the damage. So in IT, like I said before, we are losing data, we are losing access to the server for a couple of hours. Yes, it's risky for banks and other infrastructure, but in OT is much more different because it might affect people's lives. If an explosion happened in nuclear, for example, like what happened in Stuxnet in Iran as an example. So the damage in OT could be more catastrophic, could be more dangerous and cause more harm. So this is how we can simply describe the network of when we say critical infrastructure in buildings. So we have the risk, it's unfortunately unreadable. We have risk in Wi-Fi, infected laptops, USBs, unmanaged firewalls. So we have different kind of unauthorized access from external source. So we have different kind of risks distributing into the different layers of OT network. What are those different layers from layer 0 to the IT or business layer? starting from the what we call it zero, where we have the equipment such as servers, controllers, etc. Moving forward into the control network, OT network, and IT network. So how we can have that kind of risk even without us as users knowing that. So Honeywell is aligning the recommendations, portfolio, solutions, we can call it in different acronyms, into NIST and into IEC 62443 when it comes into identify, protect, detect, response, and recover from a incident. And this is how we categorize based on NIST framework, this is how we categorize our portfolio in Honeywell, our recommendations, our solutions into our customers. So we have 6 categories of solutions and services, starting from the assessment where we can identify and learn all the risks, gaps, weaknesses in the environment, and the output will be a report to the client guiding them into road mapping their transformation into more mature and more secure infrastructure. Second, we talk about the secure configuration and design, how to properly design the network to be equipped with the right controls, to be aligned into the frameworks like what Vikas mentioned in his presentation. In different countries, we have different regulation. So looking into the design at early stage and have it aligned with the specific regulation and standard, it will make it easier for the operator to expedite their maturity in cybersecurity. Appliances and softwares, so each user, each vertical, each infrastructure, each industry has different, let's say, recommended set of solutions and softwares. It depends on the criticality of their infrastructure and their facility, where our designers, our engineers will recommend the right solution, the right, softwares and hardware to be deployed, whether it's a firewall or endpoint or application white listing, etc. And then we move into the monitoring. So once we assess, once we design, configure in either in green infrastructure, green projects, or brown projects running. So this is the last slide. So the monitoring, where we need to monitor this investment, incident response to be ready to deal with any incident and to have our proactive maintenance in place. The Purdue model, maybe some of you know the Purdue model. This is something not new, where we are mapping our portfolio, our solutions into a Purdue model and classify it in different network layers. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we go with Mr. Omar Al Barghouthi next. Right? Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy calendars to be here with us. My name is Omar Al Barghouthi. I'm the regional director for Dragos. Dragos is a US-based company where we're a cybersecurity software company, so in the OT domain, and we primarily focus on what we call the critical infrastructure when it comes to oil and gas, energy and utility, and manufacturing, and that's our core focus. And part of our business, right, we're big on research and threat intelligence, right, and giving back to the community. So what I'm going to be walking you through over the next 5 to 7 minutes, hopefully, right, some of our, I wouldn't say findings, but our point of view of what's really been happening in the industrial threat landscape, right? What are some of the predictions and where do we see the industry happening? And the last part of my presentation, I'm just going to look at what really can be a takeaway out of this, right? Because this is an ever growing problem, and as Tarek and Vikas mentioned, probably they covered it from the building and the city infrastructure perspective, from the telco perspective. If you look at the industries when it comes to energy and utility, oil and gas, manufacturing, and you look at it from a national security perspective, those are mainly closely tied to countries' GDP, national security issues, political issues, so on and so forth. So probably in the last 7 or 8 years, we started hearing the term of OT cybersecurity, right? And we don't believe that this is a new problem because these industrial automation systems existed ever since. However, I'd like to visualize this slide into kind of 3 sectors. The first area, 1998, right, just right before the .NET boom when digital transformation started happening, upwards around 2009. We haven't really heard about industrial or OT cybersecurity issues, right? Until about 2009, if you guys, or some of you might remember, APT1, which was globally regarded as an IT cybersecurity campaign, and somewhere between Chinese state actors. And if you look at that specific campaign, what happened is a lot of the targeted industries, right, were industrial companies. And based on that, I think back then we didn't have the right tools or kind of the OT cybersecurity lens and processes to look at that program. If we would take that back now and analyze it, we would most likely find a lot of, it was mainly targeting the industrial cybersecurity systems. And then the area between 2010 to 2013, we call it kind of the curious ICS adversaries, right? They were still trying. They've succeeded to penetrate into certain industries or succeeded in certain campaigns, but they haven't really probably, if you've heard of the Ukrainian power grid shutdown or attack in 2014, that was kind of probably the first major global incident where adversaries managed to disrupt ICS systems. And then, so lack of collection, we didn't really know what was happening because we didn't have the tools. And then the ICS curious, right, the Ukraine, the glass smelters in Germany, what have you. And then what's really been happening from 2016 to 2022, the main thing that I would like to highlight here, I'm not going to go through them. In March or in January 2022, right, through some of our partners, we were asked to investigate an adversary, and we found a new adversary group with new technique, TTPs, and with new procedures. And we codenamed them at Chernovite, but the malware campaign is, we named it as Pipe Dream. And what was really fascinating about that, prior to that attack, when you look at the infrastructure that we're trying to protect, it had what we call a natural physical resiliency, which is when used to design power substations, industrial automation vendors, it is purpose-built to run certain processes, to generate or to distribute power or to run an oil refinery in a certain way. And that meant adversaries to be able to break into any of these systems, they had to design the attack specific to that system, to that process, that substation or oil refinery or manufacturing pipeline runs. Now with digital transformation, digitization, call it Industry 4.0, we started seeing a shift in these automation systems that we're trying to protect and defend against from being more of heterogeneous systems, right? Purpose designed, but more to homogeneous systems, right? So you took to a lot of the industrial automations now, there's more of this, what we call cookie cutter kind of approach, where you can replicate a stack of software and technology across industries or multiple industries. What that has contributed to, that natural physical resiliency barrier that we had, that we used to put the effort and the challenge on the adversaries, it's kind of started reducing. And Pipe Dream was a testament in that, because Pipe Dream was not a malware, right? It was a scalable level 2 attack framework that, when we did the research, it maps, if you're aware of the MITRE attack framework for ICS and OT security, it maps to almost 36% of its own capabilities. So you look at it, it was more of a framework that can do a lot of things. It's able to launch ransomware attacks, do reconnaissance, disruptive malware, so on and so forth. It wasn't executed, it was discovered. But this is where kind of the industry has been shifting, right? And we expect to see more and more. And where we see this is kind of the same slide, but with a different spin. Till 2017, we were tracking around 4 to 5 those ICS curious adversaries, right? 2017 onwards, today, this is probably a 10 months old slide, right? We're tracking 19 adversaries. By now, we're at 31. So you can imagine over the short period of time, the industry for the adversaries is becoming more and more lucrative, and gets kind of a hurricane path of new adversaries coming up to do disruptions for multiple reasons. The other point in this slide, right, when you look at before the 2017, I spoke about those 3 or 4, the curious ICS adversaries, and from 2017, just over a span of 5 years, or 6 years now, we're at 31. If you want to tie that, most of the regulations that we have are done prior to 2017 or heavily influenced before 2017. And that's probably, if you've attended the first panel session, right, with the heads of the NCCs, the regulation, the policies is becoming more and more important, right, to combat this massive increase or exponential growth into the adversaries. I need 30 seconds. So what do we do as industry professionals? Yes, we can run OT programs, but here this is a point of view from Dragos, where let's be radical and start small without complicating things. So we call it the 5 critical controls. First of all, I advise everyone to get an incident response plan, because you don't know when things go wrong, you need someone to call on. The second thing, once you build an incident response plan and you build what you're trying to respond against, you can translate that and you build what we call a defensible architecture. How do you design your network? How do you segment it? So on and so forth. And once you do that, you can move into monitoring and visibility, so you really know what's happening on. The fourth point is the industrial systems rely heavily on subcontractors and multiple vendors, like remote securing, remote access, MFA, whatever the technology or the approach is really crucial. And last but not least is have a proper vulnerability management program. The industry still sees a lot of vulnerabilities in the OT domain. As part of our research, on average annually we see only 4% out of those published vulnerabilities really affect an industrial control system. With that, I think I'm over time. Thank you very much. I hope you like it.
Okay, so Mr. Fahad Faisal, last but not least.
Alright, so I'll try to speak without the mic, so I am audible. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Fahad Faisal. I'm leading the OT portfolio of Fortinet in the region. I joined Fortinet a year and a half ago. But before that, I was in Siemens at Mandiant, communication power portfolio. So I'm more or less having 16 plus years of experience in OT and OT cybersecurity. Now, as an enterprise company, there are 3 main organizational priorities we talk about. The very first priority of an organization actually is the availability. Okay. Now, my colleagues actually laid a very good foundation on the differences between IT and OT. But let me just talk about one more difference, so it will be very easy to understand more, right? So when you talk about OT and IT, the KPIs are different. It is very important for design engineers, for all the sales colleagues here, to understand what exactly is the difference between OT and IT. Because if you are not designing the solution, keeping in mind the OT KPIs and you are actually designing it as per the IT requirements, you might mess up the complete project. So we follow CIA approach in IT. C stands for confidentiality, I stands for integrity, and A stands for availability. Meaning availability comes the last. Even if you lose, like for example, if you lose a Wi-Fi network in this hotel, half an hour, 1 hour, you will not like it, but you can still live without that. However, in OT, it's totally another way around. It's a 180-degree shift. We talk about AIC, where A stands for availability, I stands for integrity, and C stands for confidential. Availability comes first. You cannot afford to lose an electrical substation, oil and gas exploration site, HVAC system in your building management system, because they can not only impact your revenue, but they are directly related to your human life as well. It can also impact the human life, right? This is a very first and very important difference, right? So the first priority of the organizations is availability. Then comes digitalization. As a part of digitalization, we are bringing OT side of the house and IT side of the house, bringing together, right? So we are connecting both the systems together. So if you are connecting both the systems together, whatever threats we are seeing in IT every day, every other day your Windows patches are getting upgraded. Every other day your antiviruses are getting updated, right? So when you connect both of these worlds together, indirectly you're exposing your OT world all of these threats which were there in your IT. And last but not the least, the third priority is the compliance. It's extremely important, and I will be spending 5 minutes of my time on the compliance part, right? So from the compliance perspective, all the organizations, there are very good vendors out there in the market who are having extremely good products which can fulfill your requirements. If you start as a customer, if you hear my presentation usually which I gave, we have 50 plus products in here. If you start just picking and installing the products in your environment, you will end up with a lot of products but without having any direction, right? And here comes the compliance part, because there's a saying which goes like, everybody wants an engineer, but nobody wants an engineer without a degree. So the same is the case with the compliance as well. Everybody wants to have a compliant network, but we want to have a compliant network with a proper compliance regulations in place, right? So it's extremely important that whenever you're actually trying to look into the compliance part, you actually have a very strong cybersecurity strategy. Some of the key terminologies which are mentioned over here, policy or regulation is something, a goal you're actually having within your organization. And then comes the standards. Standards basically derive those policies. These are kind of the guidelines which you can follow to implement those strategies. Best practices or guidelines, they are not mandated by standards. These are something best ways to implement those standards and strategies. And last but not least, procedures which will follow step by step within your organization to achieve certain cybersecurity posture. On here on the right hand side, I'm just showing. There are 100 plus ICS standards right now in the market. Some of the standards are geographical. Some of them can be used globally. Some of them are industry specific. Some of them can be applied on all the industries. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but just to give you an idea, right? And on the bottom, you can see all the regulatory authorities which are basically dictating the all of these standards. Now, cybersecurity strategy in simple words. As an enterprise organization, which is actually having an OT business, which is having an IT business, they actually have to follow a cybersecurity bus architecture within their organization. And when you talk about the bus architecture, it talks about like connecting your IT network, OT network, businesses, service provider, everything together in a secure fashion. Now, how you can start? And this is the main point. This is the main pain point of the customer that Fahad gave a very nice presentation about everything. But my problem is where to start. So as a customer, you actually have a lot of different standards which we just talked about. Now, to actually achieve those, to achieve a secure architecture, you have TOGAF at CEFSA available in the market. And this TOGAF, using this TOGAF, what you can do, they define the goals of your secure architecture. goals of your secure architecture. SEPSA define the security within those architectures, right? Right. So there are more and more standards and secure architectures available in the market. If you are a regulated organization, your organizations usually what they do, sorry, I have to go, there's no back.
Nice slide, please.
All right, so in the meantime they're fixing. So I was saying that, so once you're having, if your organization is regulated, your regulatory authority tells you that within, for example, this country, you have to follow this particular standard. Within this country, you have to follow certain rules and policies. You actually think about that only. You don't have to, think about whatever other organizations are doing in USA and, for example, in Europe, right? So this is very, very important. I will take care. It is very, very. There's no back, but I'm
No. You're there.
No back. I have to go to the previous slide. Thank you. So, in short, the cybersecurity strategy is basically, it is important for the enterprise organizations to really think about this. But what about the organizations which are small, which are not big? Shall they learn about TOGAF? Shall they learn about the main ideas which TOGAF is talking about? The main purpose of implementing a cybersecurity strategy is not that. It's basically these questions which exactly defines your cybersecurity strategy. Whether, okay, I have legacy systems in my organization. Shall I totally replace them or shall I upgrade them? Do I move towards cloud? Shall I go towards virtualization or no? Shall I keep the layer 2 protocol? Shall I go for other protocols? All of these questions, any organization, if you are an enterprise organization, mid-level organization, once you actually answer those questions, you can reach out to cybersecurity. Now, last thing, some of the ISO standards, if you're having an ID, so ISO 27K standards are used to actually implement security in those. IEC 62443 is the most common and most widely used standard which can be followed to achieve secure by design architecture within your organization. And on top of that, you can layer them all using NIST directive for compliance with regulatory monitoring as well. It is very, very important. We need to understand cybersecurity is basically a continuous process. You cannot have each and everything at the same time. You have to actually improvise. You actually have to introduce stuff periodically in your organization to increase the security posture. Because if you will, first of all, put everything all together, it will be extremely costly. And for specifically the brownfield systems, which are thousands, for example, you cannot just start putting everything. For the greenfield, it's very easy for you to implement, but for the brownfield, it is not a wise idea to go into the running automation system. You just secure the boundary of that, right? So this is actually it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think if we can start the session, I'm going to probably reduce the questions. This working? Not working. Okay. I have two mics here. I think we don't need mics, right? It's not working anymore. We're going to use our loud voice. But first of all, thank you very much for your presentations. I think this domain is quite special in the way it's been addressed, and it's interesting for somebody like me who spent the last 15 to 20 years in cybersecurity, last 9 years with Mandiant, responding to incidents, seeing the way we see it is, all those organizations, big names, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's national grid or probably national critical infrastructure, where they invest millions and millions of dollars, probably hundreds of millions of dollars in cyber. We still go there and respond to incidents. And we realize that in a lot of those cases, it's not lack of investment, it's not lack of budget. It's more related to a small gap that was left behind, especially in the OT, it was mentioned. A lot of those systems have been created and designed years and years ago, but they're still operational. And this is not something you upgraded every 5 or 6 or 10 years. It's a little bit. So I'm going to cut short some of the questions that I've originally prepared. I'm going to jump a little bit to the advanced one. And they're going to be related to threat intelligence when it comes to OT. They're going to be related to incident response when it comes to OT. And I'm going to touch on the AI and machine learning kind of utilization when it comes to OT. I think those are the ones. So I'll start with the first question, right? How can threat intelligence be used to improve OT security in general? And I'm sure there are some more specialized in threat intelligence and more specialized in operations here. But I'll start from the last with the.
Right. So it's very important from the threat intelligence perspective that the organizations have the source from where they actually get threat intelligence. And maybe they can be many sources which are sending the threat intel to the organizations. Now, how they usually help the organizations from these kind of attacks. So, if you're having the threat intel coming for your organization, first of all, that threat intel can be tailored as per your requirement, as per your requirement. So it will help you in risk assessment of your organization. It can also help you in IR responses. You can have the IR responses precisely based on your based on these threat intel as well. Also, they can also help you with red teams exercises. If you get to know about these threats beforehand, you can have some internal exercises. You can really see the impact of those threats, what exactly they can damage, and accordingly you can have a mitigation plan.
Thank you very much. Vikas?
So, just continuing from where Faisal left, threat intel, in fact, is very critical to detect, incidents in advance, because threat intelligence is providing you insights into not only what currently is happening across industries, but what could be the futuristic trends as well. And you need to just customize those intel for your industry, for your sector, and see what is relevant. And once you have the threat profile created based on the intel that you receive, you can have the defense mechanisms in place. So for example, if you know the indicators of compromise, if you know the signatures, if you know that these are some of the indicators through which malicious criminals are going to penetrate your network, you are able to then have the requisite controls and policies and procedures in place. And the threat intel source, as Faisal pointed out, is so very critical. It is coming from so many diverse areas, including open source. You have information agencies which keep on providing you with information. So you need to contextualize that information, have the right collection, ingestion engine, and make a sense out of those threat feeds, and then feed your internal networks for right detection and right remediation and response as well.
Thank you. I mean, the gentleman covered the importance of threat intel, but I'll take a slightly. What do we do with threat intel? It's definitely hype nowadays, right? And I talk to the audience. As much threat intel is important to have access to that threat intelligence, but if you don't know what to do with it, or you don't know how to action it, there's no point of having it, right? And I think this is where a lot of organizations started realizing, I haven't got a SOC, I haven't got a monitoring solution, I don't have an incident response plan. So receiving all these IOCs and threat intel is good to report to the management that we know what's happening in the world, but really getting into what we call finished intel and actionable intel, this is where the industry probably needs to focus on more. And also when you come to select the threat intel, I think there's a lot of threat intel providers in the OT, but very few that the threat intel is not only a curation of multiple feeds, right, and presenting it in a different form or shape. They actually back it up with their own research or threat intel research team. So these are, I think, two of the things that I've seen as a trend, and I just wanted to debunk those myths. All right.
Thanks, Omar. So we have heard from the gentleman from cybersecurity vendor perspective, from Fortinet, from Dragos. But let me take it from Honeywell perspective. Honeywell is a manufacturer of equipment. So mostly we need to be responsible on securing those equipments once the end users are using them. So our responsibility here is to receive, let me say, the threat intel from the vendors, and then to accumulate those from different sources and equip whatever monitoring, whatever incident response plans of the customers with those. For example, some users are connecting their equipment into SOC, into NOC, into managed services from outside, into Honeywell managed services. So we need to make sure that the right bridge of threat intel between the end user and us as a manufacturer of those equipment and the cybersecurity vendors who are doing those threat intel is right. So this is, I think, from different perspectives.
Thank you, Tarek. Obviously, from threat intelligence, as we've heard from the panelists, we're talking about utilizing those threat intelligence information not only to strategize and direct our limited resources as cybersecurity teams, because we know unlimited budget is not reality. So we need to be able to prioritize and strategize our budget towards what's coming to hit us, rather than investing it in areas with lower risk profile. That's, I think, for sure was mentioned. The other area I'm happy to think about and talk about is operationalizing threat intelligence. Those feeds can be as good as they are on the portal or on the SIM, but making sure we get to our team to a maturity level that they can operationalize this in a meaningful way is quite important. I'll move to the incident response portion, which is kind of an interesting topic for me, having done more than 200,000 to 300,000 hours of incident response last year. When it comes to incident response in the OT environment, right? It's obviously a different ball game. No virtual resources, no remote work. People who have special knowledge and intelligence and capabilities are required there. Tarek, from a vendor that provide the actual OT products, when it comes to incident response, what would you think? What would you think to tell your customers for them to be prepared for the next incident? Because we know it's inevitable, it's going to happen. We just want to be better prepared.
Yeah. So why this? This is very important, Omar. Part of your introduction was the unsupported or dated equipment software. So this is very important because we are not most likely working with recent releases or recent versions of those systems. So having the incident response in place for multiple versions of product, multiple revisions of those products, some stuff 10 years, 15 years old, this is very important to understand the environment, to understand work hand in hand with your vendors, to understand the environment, to understand what are those systems, what are the version protocols, framework, etc. So this is will not be a standard incident response design. It will be very sophisticated, very customized incident response plan, because we are dealing with different age of products, and some of them, like you said, unsupported. And also it's most likely mix of products. So each infrastructure, critical infrastructure facility contains equipment from different vendors. So each vendors have their philosophy, have their methodology of doing incident response. But at the end of the day, there should be one umbrella that managing and aligning different vendors methodology and incident response handling plans, all in one sophisticated and customized plan.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll talk from a service provider perspective because we do OT incident response, and I think what we're seeing, the general notion when we talk about incident response of something happens, who am I going to call, which is really important. But to get to that stage, there's a whole bunch of, we call the proactive process. And in the OT, just expanding on what Tarek has mentioned, is often these environments or networks, they don't have the right documentation, or they're obsolete or legacy systems. So it really drills down to the proactive work preparing. What processes are really important to us, right? Are we focusing on our safety systems in an oil platform? Are we focusing on what are the crown jewels? Because these environments or these networks could have tens or probably hundreds of thousands of different components, right? You're not going to be able to understand anything and protect against everything. So really doing that first assessment, or what really matters for the organization, look at the network, the topology, where the crown jewels are, and then put incident response scenarios for those. That would prepare you to better respond for incidents, and have that as a continuous cycle. It's not one time and that's it. Those plans have to always be revisited due to business changes, regulatory compliance requirements, what have you.
I have a slightly different take, and I will approach it from a different standpoint. So if you look at the environment where digitalization has happened, so we have IT, OT, we have AI, machine learning coming into the equation, everything is connected. What is critical is that whatever your attack surface is, it is increasing by the day, and if you don't have the right visibility, if you don't monitor it continuously, and once detection has happened, so breaches are going to happen, that is inevitable. You cannot have a situation by having preventative controls, you will be able to avoid an attack. Now the mantra is, if you have an attack, how quickly you are able to detect and then remediate by having the right response times. Now this responsiveness can only be brought in through automation. And when I say automation, you need to have playbooks, you need to have your incident response procedures and policies tested, laid out. And when I say automation, quickly you get to triage a problem. You are able to then have the remediation plan as well, that okay, this network or this IP needs to be completely blocked, we need to do this, and that's how you approach these the incident response through right automation, machine learning, and by quickly remediating and having the right playbooks in place.
Nothing more to be said what Omar said previously, that even if you're having very sophisticated threat intels and you are not doing anything with that, there is no use. But I just want to add one more point over here, that okay, we can have SLAs, we can have great support from the IR companies which are in the market, but for the organizational engineers who are the very first point of contact of these kind of issues, so there should be a proper, at least a basic level of IR mechanism within the organizations as well, even if they are taking the services from the outsiders, the service providers. So at least they can mitigate, or they can hold that the spread of that particular attack within an organization for a certain period of time. That's it.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Just look, the probably will bring the last point, which is AI and machine learning, right? Before I step into this, back on the incident response points, we've when we get to an incident, what we normally find very similar to the IT, but the difference between when we get in an incident with an OT problem is when we do the forensics and investigation, we normally realize that the threat actors have been in the environment for an excessive amount of time, where in the IT side, the threat actors tend to be visible or to be detected probably within a month, where in the OT, it's the challenges that threat actor could be in the environment for years before they decide to make an action. So that's on the incident response part, which we all need to think about. But talking quickly, probably a 1 minute kind of thoughts on machine learning and AI when it comes to automating or enhancing the security when it comes to OT, and we'll start with that.
All right, so as it sounds like AI and ML, they are very useful, but there are a lot of challenges when you bring them in the OT environment. For example, there's a trust deficiency when you try to bring the AI in the OT environment. I'll tell you the reason why. Because usually AI is basically kind of a black box for the asset owners. You cannot predict actually all the time what exactly is going to be the outcome of it. So in the critical infrastructure, it becomes a very challenging thing when you have this kind of mechanics. Secondly, there should be a precise line or border between the AI and the human intervention as well. Like till this point, the AI can intervene, but from this point onwards, there should be a human interaction to take it further. Very important. Another important point should be that usually in OT we have legacy systems, old systems. So if you're having an AI technology, latest technology, there might be some compatibility issue as well. And also, last thing which I would like to add, the OT systems most of the time, especially in distribution architecture, spread across the country. So from scalability perspective, this could be a challenge for AI and ML to actually manage that. So one more point I just want to add. Usually for AI and ML to create a model for cybersecurity, it is important to have some sort of quantitative data available. So from OT systems, there is no such historical data available from the past. It becomes a bit of a challenge for AI to create a model for cybersecurity for these critical infrastructures.
From my standpoint, AI machine learning models need to be self-learning. The data which goes into learning of these models have to be quality data, noise has to be cut out. Need to make sure that there is more responsible AI coming into equation. When I say responsible AI, we are saying that you should not be training the data which has a lot of noise, and so that you create more false positives, because if you have a situation where you get more false positives or alarms, you are not aiding the analysts who are going to be reviewing those logs or alerts. You are increasing their workload. And especially in an OT environment, if you have false alarms or you have certain incidents which are triggered, which are non-incidents, or if you have false negatives, you will have a situation wherein you are impacting the human lives, etc. So I feel transparency, removing of biases, and making sure that the quality of data that goes into AI machine learning is of good quality, and you remove the noise. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to talk because OT is a broad domain, so my answer could be perceived as controversial from the area that we focus on. So ICS, industrial control systems and critical infrastructure. I think the AI thing, it's going to come, but we're still far ahead, right? I think the focus now globally, if you look at, I'd say 90-95% of the large organizations, they haven't built in visibility in more than 20-30% of their entire infrastructure. So there's still years ahead of building that really visibility where we would understand more threats, we would understand more vulnerabilities, and we would have enough data sets to be able to build AI models, right? And to build AI models really in those systems is mainly to do analysis, to give recommendations, but we don't recommend doing anything or injecting anything back in terms of actions into those networks, right? So it's always at the passive and completely passive to do certain analysis and drive insights.
Yeah, so it's exactly to Omar's point. In OT, we are always behind of adopting new let's say, aspects or new strategies. So we remember the open platform, open source, connectivity. So all those aspects took time to be approved and adopted by the OT environment. So this is one point, it's the careful adoption, and it will take years, so we have to be patient of accepting the AI and machine learning in the OT environment. Plus one very simple point here, So machine learning, AI, it's accumulative learning. So those systems are learning from behavior, accumulative learning. So who is regulating that learning? Who is making sure that there is no bad data or a bad influence of that adoption into that machine learning, so into that machine. So yes, we need to be careful. We need to keep distance in adopting AI and machine learning in the ICS and critical infrastructure of these systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tarek, my esteemed panelists. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the time and sorry for running over time. Thank you.
Thank you.